This is Apple's last gen 2020 M1 powered MacBook Pro. And this is Apple's latest 2021 M1 Pro 14-inch MacBook Pro. And today we're going to be comparing the two in terms of processing power as well as graphical capabilities when it comes to video editing. So let's get into it. Hey, what's going on? Prashil here, and today we're going to be comparing the 2020 M1 powered MacBook against the 2021 M1 Pro MacBook. And we're going to see whether all this hype over the newer model is actually real. Now this year, Apple's really been getting off to throwing around different graphs when explaining just how powerful the M1 Pro and the M1 Pro Max chips are this year, and to see whether it's actually worth paying an extra grand for the newer model. So let's get into it. Alright, so for this test, I decided to use about 8.5 minutes of 4K footage that was shot at 30 frames per second. So within this footage, I've used custom intros and outros imported in through After Effects. I've also used custom music as well as voiceovers. I've also used transition effects as well as graphic text sprinkled here and there. And that's pretty much it. A pretty basic video, so let's get on to the render times for the 2020 MacBook Pro. Alright, so right off the bat, the 2020 MacBook Pro pretty much blazed through a significant chunk of the video, but towards the end really started to struggle. But it was able to bring it home after about 8.5 minutes. Alright, so moving on to exporting the footage. Now this is where the 2020 MacBook Pro really started to struggle and heat up a little bit. After about 12 minutes, the MacBook Pro was able to successfully export the footage. Now after rendering and exporting the footage, it is important to note that the battery did drop to 72% from a full charge. Alright, it is important to note that there was a bit of a delay when I actually started the timer because I had to unlock my phone and then start the timer. So we can add about 5 seconds to the time, but honestly I don't think it really mattered because the 2021 MacBook Pro absolutely blazed through this footage. All in all, it was about 3 minutes and 43 seconds accounting for my delay, which is less than half of what the previous MacBook's render time was. Alright, so moving on to exporting the footage. Again, the 2021 MacBook Pro was able to make light work out of exporting the footage, and it's important to note that it actually didn't heat up as much as the previous generation MacBook. So coming in at about 5 minutes and 22 seconds, it's once again less than half the time that it took the previous generation to export the same footage. Alright, so from a full charge, you have about 81% left after exporting the footage. So there you have it then. The results are in, and as you can probably already tell, the performance gains on the M1 Pro chip is actually quite significant over the standard M1 chip. In fact, when it came to rendering 4K footage that was around 8.5 minutes long, the M1 Pro MacBook Pro was able to do that in less than half the time than the standard M1 chip MacBook Pro. Gosh, I've said Pro a lot, but bear with me on this. And the results are quite similar when it came to actually exporting that footage out. Now the M1 Pro chip managed to do that in again half the time that it took the standard M1 chip. And so there is a significant boost in performance with the M1 Pro chip. And so if you do drop that extra grand, you will see a significant performance boost. Now whether or not it's actually worth paying an extra grand for that performance boost, honestly, depends on you. Now you see, if you're a cinematography or videography hobbyist and you're just doing this for fun, I honestly believe you can get away with not having to drop that extra 1 grand for the M1 Pro series. I honestly think the M1 chip is still a pretty solid platform for you to work off, and because it's just a hobby, I really don't think that extra time gain that you get with rendering files as well as exporting them is that big of a deal. Now if you are a professional on the other hand, and time is money, then I honestly have to recommend the M1 Pro series or even the M1 Pro Max series if you prefer that bigger screen and you're always on the go. So there you have it, the M1 chip versus the M1 Pro chip. And yeah, you saw the results, you saw the facts, and I guess the rest is up to you. So tell me, what would you pick? The M1 series or the M1 Pro series? Let me know in the comments below. And yeah, looks like we're out of time, so I'll catch you in the next one.